And like I said, you know, in my car I use 1 turn of preload, and that's something you got to figure out with your car, you know, by testing it. Start out with no preload, see how it hits. If it's hitting too hard and violent, add a little preload to it. Could be 1 turn, could be 1 flat of the nut or the adjusting bar. Just keep track of it. I put a mark on mine with some tape here. It's been on there for probably 15 years. You can see how it's pretty much worn. But that's the key, man. You got to practice, and you got to write down what you do so you know and you don't get lost in your tune, especially with suspension, you know, especially with shocks when they have 8 million different clicks. People talk about it all the time, but it doesn't really relate to me unless you got the exact same shock. We understand about the clicks, and it can make a difference, but sometimes it's hard to tell what someone else's changes are going to be with how many clicks you put on their shocks if you don't have their car present, if you don't know anything about their car. So that's something that you got to figure out. Like I said, I'm going to change these nylon lock washer nuts after this time. Usually I tighten them and then I'll mark them with a paint marker. So I know if they're moving, and I'll check them. Like I said, I usually don't change the adjustments too much once I get it where I want it to be. Because it doesn't really need a lot of change. I mean, once you get it hooked up, you know, then the fine tuning is done with the shocks, and that's where you need double adjustables. Once you get to a certain horsepower, I'd say once you're into the 9s, you should be having double adjustable shocks. It's getting too dangerous with not being able to control the power, and I'm just going from my own experience, you know. Whether you want to risk it or try to get away with what you got in regards to just single adjustable, you know, keep it on. If you're making a lot of power, keep it on full tight. You know, keep them cinched down and just back them off a little at a time to prevent violent launching and wheel stands if your car's hooking good. Now, I talk about these plates here. I like this stuff loose. You can see how it pivots here. You know, there again, the spring here is tight, but not overly tight. It's not binding there. You want that to move, especially this pivot point. This is pivotal, no pun intended. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to lower the rear end. Then we can unload the U-bolts, you know, because the rear end's loaded now as it's sitting on the ground with the wheels on it. So like I said, if you pull those off now, kablam, you're done. You're going to have a mess and get hurt. So you make sure you take the weight off. But once we get that weight off, we'll undo the U-bolts and we'll keep it going from there. I'm going to try to salvage or reuse these Delalume bushings that I have in the back. You can see them back here. Shouldn't be too much of an issue. I can press that one part out, and that's where we're at.